Hey, one of the studies that I looked at a few months ago, back actually last 2015, some of the trends that was taking place in church life that kind of got me thinking about the whole concept of Sunday. And so what the shift has taken place in the last 10 years in churches, and then this isn't people who are far from God, who maybe don't believe or haven't accepted Christ as Lord and Savior, but this is a shift that's taking place in the actual church of Christ followers. And one of them is that they're attending less Sunday morning worship or corporate worship services for various reasons. And I talked a little bit about them last week, but one of the ones that caught my eye and what this series is about is that one of the reasons why they're attending less is there's a failure to see a direct benefit of corporate worship, right? That somewhere along the line, we have kind of embraced that Sunday is an extra day, not a special day. Right? It's an extra day where we catch up on emails, we get our chores done. I forgot to mow the lawn's growing, I got to mow it, the bathroom needs to be painted or cleaned, whatever the case is. And we look at Sunday as an extra day, not a special day. And we've lost the idea that there is a direct benefit in our life as Christ followers of what Sunday is. And so the series this week, last week, this week, and then the next 3 weeks is going to look at how Sunday morning affects us and how it impacts our life. And that's why I keep saying that Sunday isn't an extra day, it's a special day, right? And so we'll unpack that today and then the next couple weeks, all right? So if you have your programs, open it up, the outline, and we're going to look at the fourth commandment, all right? And we'll talk a little bit about the fourth commandment. Now remember that God gave Moses the commandments for the children of Israel, and as they were leaving out of captivity and they were going into the promised land, or actually they were going to take a tour for 40 years first, and then they eventually were going to get into the promised land, he gave them the 10 commandments. Now I mentioned last week, and just kind of let me say, the Sabbath in the New Testament has changed, right? Because of the resurrection of Christ, the New Testament church began to worship Jesus on the first day, or on Sunday, the Lord's Day. And that's how we transitioned from a Saturday to a Sunday, and I don't want to get caught up in all that stuff, but just to kind of in a quick explanation, that's why we changed. So look with me in your outline and we'll get going. The 10 commandments, the rules and laws that were given, were not given as a condition of their relationship with God, okay? So hit the pause button, all right? So when God gave Moses the 10 commandments, it wasn't a condition of a relationship, all right? So you'll oftentimes hear people say, I follow Christ, I keep the 10 commandments, as if somehow keeping the 10 commandments is going to be the relationship, and that's not why he gave them the 10 commandments. But rather as confirmation of the relationship. So he doesn't give them the 10 commandments as a key to a relationship, but as a confirmation of the relationship that he is in with them. All right, we'll get into that in a second. He already established that he had already established with the nation of Israel. The rules and laws of God are not a condition of his love, but rather confirmation of his love, all right? So hit the pause button, because this is so big to grab a hold of. When we look, whether it be Old Testament or New Testament times, God doesn't give us principles and commandments to ruin our life. He gives them to bless our lives, all right? He doesn't give them to us so that we are in a relationship. He gives them to us as confirmation of our relationship. Okay? So just as I can't set rules and laws for your kids, although I'd like to, nor can you to my kids, they're all grown, right? You give rules to your kids because they're your kids, right? You don't give rules and regulations to your next door neighbors, although you think you could raise them better than they do, but that's a whole different other issue, right? So you give rules and regulations to your kids because they are in a relationship with you. And you don't give it to them to ruin their life. You give it to them to protect their life and to bless their life. Does that make sense? All right, so when you think about the 10 Commandments that we're going to actually stick at 4, but I'm going to just kind of set the tone for it. When you think about it, it wasn't a condition of the relationship, right? It was a condition because they were in it. So God didn't say, here are 10 Commandments, keep them, I'll keep score, and I'll decide at the end whether we're in it or not. He says, we're in a relationship with you. The Passover, right? That's the whole idea. They trusted in God that He would pass over. Right? They're in the relationship, and he says, here are the rules, if you will, the commandments, because we are in a relationship. Not to ruin your life, but to bless your life. Does that make sense? Yes. All right. So if you look with me in Joshua, and then we're going to get into this. So Joshua 1, verse 8, an amazing verse. And it says this, do not let this book, speaking of the laws, do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate on it on Sunday when you have nothing else to do, day and night, so that you may be careful to do written in it. And here's the transition, right? Then what? Then you will be prosperous and successful. Well, when? Well, when you meditate on it, when you think on it, when you're careful to do everything that's written in it, then you'll be prosperous, then you'll be successful, right? And so he gives us his rules, his laws, so to speak, not to ruin our life, but really to protect us and bless our lives. And so whether that's issues about marriage, finances, raising kids, integrity, the whole bit, it's not like so he can ruin your life, but he wants to bless your life. He wants to give you great things, and he wants to make sure that our character is right. So we got that okay? All right. So look with me, number 1 in your outline. God wants to be your number 1, all right? He wants to be your one and only God. That's the first commandment. And he doesn't want you to attempt to make, build, or erect anything in his place. That's the second commandment. Are we following so far? And then the third one is, he says, hey, don't misuse my name, right? And so a lot of times people say, when someone says Jesus, it bothers me. That's using the Lord's name in vain. Listen, it isn't comfortable, and I don't particularly care for it, but that is not what it means to use the Lord's name in vain. To use the Lord's name in vain is to slander him or to put him in a position or a place that he doesn't want to be in. All right? So that's what it means. So when someone says, oh God, listen, no one likes to go, that was beautiful, that's my Lord, I'm worshiping, thank you very much. But that isn't what it means to use the Lord's name in vain. Trust me, God has bigger and thicker skins than going, oh, I'm so disappointed the guy said Jesus, and I'm totally bummed down about it. So it means to slander him or to invoke his name in something that he doesn't want to be a part of. Okay, are we following so far? So, God needs to be number 1. Hey, don't build anything in my image and worship it. Number 3, don't use my name in vain. And then 4 is to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Now, I stopped there because when you think about the 10 Commandments, and I'm sure all of you have that written on your wall in your office, probably not. And so, but it's funny when you read it. It's like, okay, God wants to be first. You're kind of going, yeah, okay, he's a jealous God. He doesn't. Who wants to be the second wheel? Who wants to be the third wheel in a relationship, right? None of us do, right? Hey, don't build anything and worship it instead of me. You kind of go, okay, I kind of get that. Hey, no one likes to be slandered. No, anybody want to be slandered, right? No one likes to be slandered, so that's good. And then the 4th is take a day off. And to me, that seems a little odd. And then he goes into murder, adultery, right? And you're kind of like, whoa, wait. And I'm almost see like Moses up on Mount Sinai, right? God's speaking. You've seen the movie, right? So you watched it. And so he's speaking. He's writing it down on the tablets. And God says, and take a day off. He's like, what? Take a day off. I get the murder, the adultery, stealing, right? But a day off, that doesn't make sense. And then here's the funny thing of all of us. Probably, well, I just say this, in my pastor years and counseling, I've had people come who've committed adultery. There's an enormous amount of guilt in that, right? that's been caught for stealing, not like a grape at Costco, although some of you are eating the grapes that I'm buying, and I'm not getting the full 5 pounds that I need to. So, murder, right? A lot of guilt in that. The Sabbath. If any of you guys called the mental health department and said, I need a counseling appointment, I feel incredibly guilty, I didn't recognize the Sabbath last week. Just kind of weird, right? There's not a lot of guilt in that, in the sense that you've missed the Sabbath. And so when I read through the 10 Commandments, I'm like, well, why would he do that? What is the reason why he would place that in the 10 Commandments? Why wouldn't he just create an addendum? Why didn't he just say, hey, murder, adultery, stealing, and by the way, guys, there's an addendum that just once a week, just recognize me. That's it. And that's on the back of the book. It's a footnote on the 10 Commandments. But it isn't. It's number 4. So why is it? Why does he make it so important that as they haven't even built their community, created an economy in the new promised land, that he gives them a day to pause, because that's what Sabbath means, an intermission? Why would he do that? So let's think this through. When the children of Israel left, there were about 2 million of them. They had spent 400 years in captivity. They had basically been slaves. They were told what the master wanted them to do. They were to do it. If you weren't producing as a slave, you know the outcome, right? There's not a retirement plan. There's no Social Security, right? And so you would do what the master wanted you to do, and then with whatever free time that you may have, you would go home and you would do chores and you would do the things for your own family. And this is the mindset in which they were in. So God says to them, because he hears their complaints, and God says, okay, I'm going to set you free. And so you know the whole thing, go and let my people go. You got all that stuff, right? So 2 million of them leave captivity. Now, how many of you have ever gone camping for 2 weeks with your family? Just raise your hand. All right? That's it? Some of you need to leave Oakley, okay? There's a whole world out there. It's amazing, right? Now, let's see it again, because this is not a trick question, folks. It's pretty simple. How many of you ever gone camping for 2 weeks or longer? All right. Oh, Lord, I'm not sure what you're doing to me, but all right. So here's how it works in our family, especially when we had the boys. We had to get a trailer for us to camp in, and then I had to get a trailer to carry the stuff that we needed to carry, right? Is that true? Sure. I mean, why do you think airline says, no, 1 luggage? Because they got tired of carrying your refrigerators when you would go on trips. And they don't fit in the bin above the airplane, right? And they're like, come on, ladies, you don't need everything. You're only gone for 2 weeks, right? And so they didn't have laundromats. They didn't have 7-Elevens. They had no short stops. How many of you remember that? Short stop, yeah. No Costco's, no 24-hour grocery stores. They had none of that stuff. When they left captivity, they were told, pack everything that you have and let's go. So they pack all that they have. They head out from captivity, and they're going to go to the promised land. They have no idea where that is. And of course, we know that they take a 40-year tour to try to figure out where it's at. And so they leave, right? And not long into their journey out, guess what happens? They run out of food. And so here, Mom and Dad, here's where this thing was invented, right? Are we there yet, right? And I'm hungry, right? So there it is. You thought it was your family. It was all the way back in the children of Israel. They're in the back seat of the camel. They're going, Dad, are we there yet? We passed by this bush last year. Looks the same. Can we not find our way? I'm hungry, right? And so God says, here's what he does. Here's what he does. He one morning, they open up their tent and they look out and they find manna. Manna. Now, what's interesting about manna is we don't know a lot about it. We know that it's white in nature. We know that it tastes like cake cooked in oil according to Numbers and Deuteronomy. We know that it tastes like honey, so maybe kind of a donut kind of thing is what it would taste like, all right? And so for 40 years, God provided for the children of Israel. And every day they woke up, they opened up their tent, and this honey taste cake that was cooked in oil was there for them to take. And so guess what they did? They did just like you and I would do. You would look out and you'd go, hey, let's get some for today, and hey, why not tonight and tomorrow, right? And so they would go out and they would squirrel it away, and God said, that ain't the way it works. So he would put worms in it so that they only had enough for one day. And then on Friday, the day as they would prepare for the Sabbath, which was their Saturday, he would tell them, you can get 2 days of food, and I won't ruin it. And on the Sabbath, you can eat what you collected on Friday. And so he gave them 7 days of provision in 6. And for 40 years, the children of Israel had a visual illustration that God was their provider. And that they had one day, the Sabbath, where they would pause, and we'll see what it is, where they would reflect and they would observe the Sabbath. And so he gave them that as this visual illustration of his provisions. If you skip down with me to Exodus 16, verse 26. The other verses, the one above it is just the 10 Commandments. 6 days you will gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, you will not. There will not be any. Right? Verse 27, and here's where we're all sitting right here. Nevertheless, some of them went out on the 7th day to gather it, but they found none. Right? Even then, just like us, they were looking for loopholes to get out of it in order to observe the Sabbath, be blessed by God, but they wanted to kind of push the envelope a little bit. And God says, come on, man, are you kidding me? How long are you going to be in this position and fold your arms and not get it? Verse 28, then the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my instructions? Verse 29, bear in mind that the Lord has given you the Sabbath, right? That is why on the 6th day he gives you bread for what? Right? Everyone is to stay where he is on the Sabbath day. No one is to go out. So the people rested on the Sabbath. And the Sabbath was, the verb is, it comes from a verb, it means intermission, right? You're to work 6, you're to hit the pause button, an intermission, and you're to take a day off, and you're to recognize that God is the provider. Number 2 in your outline. God gave them a weekly reminder to depend on him. And for 40 years, God provided. In fact, we know that when the land in Jericho produced fruit, God no longer gave them manna because the land in which he gave them was now producing their livelihood. And he stopped, right? And so he gave them this illustration as a visual reminder that he is going to give them 7 days of provisions in 6 days, and they are to experience this rhythm where there's an intermission, because we all need that rest. We all need to step back from the world in which we live in, press pause to get refocused, right? To get a different perspective, and we'll see how it is. And you think about this. If you look at the 52 Sundays a year, God has given you 7.5 weeks of spiritual vacation to unwind from the crazy world in which we live in, to press pause, intermission, to get away from the world, to come in, to get refocused, right? To get refueled in our life, to kind of get rebalanced in the world in which we live in. And so for 40 years, he gave the children of Israel this idea that God is going to provide for you. That the Sabbath for them wasn't an extra day, even though that's what they wanted it to be. But it was a special day. It was a day where they were going to get their mind in a different place. Now, here's the temptation. The temptation is to say, well, Dan, listen, this is the 21st century. We live in a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week economy. We work in a global economy. Listen, if I take a break, my coworker is going to come in and step on my throat, and he's going to get the deals, and he's going to get the raise, and she's going to get the promotion, and she's going to lead the pack. And I can't take a break. And so Sunday isn't a special day, it's an extra day, and if I have time, then I'll kind of sneak in and I'll do my thing, and then I'll go out, and then I'll go to finish up the emails, finish up the contract, and I got to hit sin, because, listen, this is just the economy in which we live in. And God says, listen, are you going to trust me? Are you going to trust 7 days of provision in 6? And they did the very thing that we do. They looked around and said, hey, is anyone looking? No, go grab some. We'll just put it in the back of the tent. No one will see it. And they went out and they squirreled it away. And God said, come on, man. You can't do that. You're going to have worms in it. What if all that you did on your intermission day, your Sabbath, that God sent worms to? Kind of interesting to think about, isn't it? Aren't you glad? Aren't you glad he's not sending you worms in your life? All right? Verse 10. But on the 7th day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. And then here's the loophole, right? Neither you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your manservant, nor your maidservant, nor your animals, and if any spaceships land in your property, no aliens either. Alien was a foreigner, which would have probably been an Egyptian, right? And yet they were looking for it. And here's why. Verse 11. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in, circle the word them, because it's probably a word when you read through that you don't even pause to recognize what it means. And he rested on the 7th. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath and made it holy. So he says back to 11, verse 11, he says that he made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. The creation, right? And it's continuing. The fish replenish, the food replenishes, right? Corn grows, seeds, it goes back in the ground, it produces a bigger crop, right? Chickens have lay eggs, and then they have more chickens and all that kind of stuff, right? And the them in there is the you, the me, the fish in the sea, the animals in which we eat, the produce in which grows and seeds grow, and then they go back into the ground and reproduce themselves. And it is his way of saying that all that we have comes from him. And that is why we have a Sabbath. It is to pause and to recognize that all of our provisions, our job, our money, our breath, our heart, our mind, the smarts that we have, are a provision. They are the them that he has placed in you. Number 3, everything we are and have comes from the provider, and there's the fill in the blank, God. And the children of Israel would have recognized that, because for 40 years they had a visual and a reminder that every time they opened the tent and there was manna on the ground, and they collected it each day with the exception of Friday, in which they collected 2 days for the Sabbath on Saturday, that God was the provider for them. And again, I know that there's this big pushback, but Dan, that's then and this is now. I actually believe that they had it more difficult than we do. And here's why. What is the shelf life of a Twinkie? Does anybody know? 100 years, 1,000 years, right? How about a canned food, right? Months, years? Come on, be honest, right? You're like, 2013. Oh no, this is still good, right? Right? Got a freezer? Refrigerator? Sure. You got a water purifier? Bottled water? Absolutely, right? They didn't have any of that. If they didn't smoke their meat, or they didn't preserve it in salt, and even that was iffy, they didn't live weak paycheck to paycheck kind of living. They literally lived hand to mouth. And if they didn't go out, there's 2 million of them. You're fending for yourself. There isn't a Walmart, Super Walmart, or whatever it is that you go to. There isn't any of that. If you don't provide for your family, guess what? No one is. And if you go out, you got to shoot something or catch it or trap it or grow it. And if you're not going to eat. So actually, I think the big pushback is, well, this is the 21st century, Dan. This is the internet, global economy, blah, blah, blah. You know, this is the big pushback. And I'm just here to say, I actually think it's harder to live back then than it is for us today. Right? You can go to Costco and you could fill up that cart as if you think the end times are coming. Come on. I've seen some of you, right? And you push the cart and you got the thing stacked up to the brim, right? And I'm not even making references to the toilet paper. I'm talking about all the other stuff, right? Because you just know someone said Jesus is coming back, or the end times are coming, or whatever they call those people. You got a thing underneath your backyard, and what are they called? Preppers. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yeah, preppers. What? What's that mean? Right? Now, I'm not saying don't store up food and all that kind of stuff. Do, and then actually get tri-tip and ribs and then invite me over. That would be the best way to do it. And I'll tell you, I think the end's coming, so let's cook and let's eat now, right? And we'll be in good shape. So the idea is to remind ourselves that the Sabbath is, in our case, it's the Lord's Day, is that God is the provider in your life. And that's what Sunday worship is. And that's why I push back to you guys and say, listen, Sunday isn't an extra day. It's a special day. It's a special day in your outline. So why do Sundays make better Mondays? And let me just kind of share with you, and then one, in your outline there, is that I'm refocused. Right? And I've said this to you guys many times, that I view Sunday as, listen, get your mind on Christ. Amen. Right? That's how I view Sunday morning. Right? It's like a shake, grab you by the ears, by the collar, shake you. Listen, get your eyes on Christ. Right? There's a sense of a refocused life, and as a result of that, you'll be refreshed and you'll be refueled, and we're going to look at those 3 next week. In fact, when you look at the definition of worship in the Old Testament, worship was both destructive, it tears down, but it was also constructed, that it builds up. And so worship, if you're doing it properly, it breaks down all the different things that come at us, that stick on us, right? And it destructs those, it peels them away, and then it builds you up so that you're focused on Christ, right? That's what worship is about when you begin to look at it from an Old Testament perspective. And we'll look at each of those. So look with me in Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. 2 times Moses gives the children of Israel the 4th commandment. The first time, Exodus 20, verse 8, he uses the word remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. That is a verb, and you see in your outline, it means to look back. Okay, and we're going to see that. Moses gives the 10 Commandments twice, once to the children of Israel as they are entering into the wilderness or leaving captivity, and once again 40 years later as they're getting ready to leave the wilderness and they're going to enter into the promised land. Okay? Deuteronomy 5:12 is the other time, a different verb, different word, different meaning. He uses the word observe. He says, observe the Sabbath and keep it holy as the Lord your God has commanded you. And that word means to look forward. Okay, so are you with me so far? Okay, so 2 times he gives them 2 different verbs. One is to look back. The other one is to look forward. One of them is to look back. What has God done? How has God provided for us? What is the provisions he's given us? What has he done in and through my life? Looking back. The other one is looking forward. What is he going to do? What is he going to do in my family's life? What is he going to do in my life? How is he going to speak into my life or my kids' life, my grandkids' life, and change us? So I'm looking back. I'm looking forward. I'm remembering the past, and I'm looking forward into the future, right? So look with me in your outline. Whether I'm looking back or forward to the Lord's Day, my mind is on who? The Lord. You want to know why Sundays make better Mondays? Because it totally changes your perspective. See, here it is, folks, and this is it in a nutshell, right? Put a bow on it and go home, but not yet because I'm not finished. But here's what it is. If you treat the Lord's Day as an extra day, here's the way it works. Maybe you sneak in and you do a worship time. Maybe you don't. Maybe you run to the river. Maybe you run to the snow. Maybe you run here, you run there, you mow the lawn, you prune the trees, you plant the garden, whatever it is. Maybe you do that. Then you roll out of bed on Monday to go to work. Guess where Sunday your perspective was, your mind was? It was on all the things you had to do. It wasn't on the Lord being the provider. Your mind wasn't settling on how good God is, what he's done to you in your past, what he's going to do to in your family in the future. You're rolling out of bed and you're thinking, I got to fight traffic, I got to go down Vasco, I got to do this, I got to do that. Your perspective is completely shifted. And you wonder why Monday is a grind. Because your perspective has been completely shifted. Because Sunday isn't a special day, it's an extra day. It's to catch up on all the things that you need to catch up on. It's not a day to pause and to remember that the thems are given to you by God. It's not a time of pausing and saying, God has blessed me with a job. You roll out of bed and you go, I hate my coworkers and they're like the worst thing in the world and all this other. Hey, listen, maybe God's trying to teach you patience. Maybe God's trying to teach you to love your neighbor as yourself. Oh, well, you don't know who I'm working with. Hey, listen, I work with 3 guys. I know exactly what it's like, right? Every day I roll out of bed and go, honey, I'm not going. She's like, you're the pastor, you got to go. I'm like, all right, I get paid to be good, but that's it, right? But that's how we do it. And then we wonder how come Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday is a wreck. Because the Lord's Day is to change our perspective. It's to look back on what God has done. And it's to look forward into the future, into what God is going to do in your life. And you look with me in your outline. Whether I'm looking back or looking forward to the Lord's Day, my mind is on the Lord. And what has my mind has me or has you. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And if you roll out of bed and your thoughts are not on the Lord, guess what? You're going to get exactly what you're feeling on Monday as you fold your arms and you're thinking of some way to make money without being illegal and all this other stuff, right? And if I could just win the lottery, I'd walk into my boss's office and I would tell him this and I would tell him that. You even made a deal with God. You said, God, I'll give you 12%. Right? Some of you are like, well, no, I stopped at 11, but I'm going to write 12 right now. Now think about this. When my boys were little, and I remember like the first time we went to Disneyland, of course, Tammy and I had gone many, many times to Disneyland, and so we get that time they had like the AAA things, and the boys would be looking at the AAA magazine with Disneyland, and we were talking about the rides and all this other stuff, and we were looking forward to it, right? And they would want to talk about, well, I'm not sure if I want to ride Dumbo because it's a little higher, and it goes around in a circle. And I would say, listen, it costs us like $9,000 to ride that stupid thing. You're riding it. I don't care what it is. I don't care if you scream, Mommy, Mommy, Mommy. You're riding it because it's a fortune to do it. I got to go to the bathroom. Listen, go to the bathroom in your pants, but not tonight when we're in the camper. You're going to ride it, right? All right, I just don't want to ride that train because there's people get killed on that train. You're still going to ride it. We're going to trust God's sovereign. That's it. We're going, right? And then mom and dad, come on, be honest, right? And if you do vacations with my wife and I, it's not like, luxury, all this other stuff. We're like the SWAT team, all right? So we run in, right? Each of the boys got their hands on my right shoulder, and we're running in like the SWAT team, right? You turn left, you turn right. And so here was the rule at Disneyland. We would get right at the rope, right? So they opened up at like 4:45, so we were there at 3:15 a.m., right? We're ready, right? And as soon as the whistle blows, some of you are like, hey, I need to go on vacation with that dude. The reality is this is how we do it. So as soon as they pull the rope, right, then you have all those people like, oh, Main Street. Oh, honey, look at Mickey Mouse. Like, get out of the way. We don't care about Mickey Mouse. We're going to go to the back of the park, and we're going to ride the rides. We're going right to Toontown, right? And so while all of you are looking, I think I'm going to get a cup of coffee. This is all free, right? I never could think of this. You pay $5,000 to get into Disneyland, right? And you stop at a Starbucks, and you spend $25.54 for a Go Grande, right? Which is like smaller than a Dixie cup. You're in Disneyland. Bag the coffee. Just get on the ride, right? So we're pushing people away, and they're like, who is that? And I got my Jesus Loves You on the back of my shirt. So as they're seeing me, they're like, oh, look at a Christian. It's like, yeah. So all the kids we're all going in. We get to the back, and we ride all the rides, right? Even the ones that they don't want to ride, right? That little ride, I forgot what it is. It's like, guilty, guilty. It's like, hey, that's church. Let's do that, all right? So what is that ride? I don't even know what it is. It's so uplifting. It's like, honey, there's no condemnation in Christ. Jesus died for us. Don't worry about it. You're not guilty. They are, but we're not, all right? So we get to the back of the park. We ride all the rides. And then we start working out as you slowpokes are working look at an island, right? An island, it costs $9,000 to go to the island. Who cares if Tom Sawyer's on there? So we would go to the front, we would ride the front, and that was right around dinner time because we couldn't afford dinner because dinner was like $27.50 for a burger. So we go across the street to McDonald's, eat a burger, fill up our cups multiple times because they're free refills, and then we would go back with a caffeine high, and then we would go back and we would ride the rides, right? So our boys, as they grew older, they learned that, right? And that was how we vacationed. And so when we look forward to the vacation, that's exactly how we would do it, right? And we all looked forward to that. And then on the way back home, how did the song go in It's a Small World? It's a small, right? And that song would be playing, right, in our mind. And then what we would do is we would pull off at the bottom of the grapevine. There's a roadside rest. And the kids would go to the bathroom and we would leave them. Not really. But they would, how does that song go? How does that song go? It's like, oh, right? And then they would remember all the stuff. Daddy, remember when you forced us to ride that Star Wars and I wet my pants? It's like, yeah, I know, you're 15. Get over it, all right? Let's just move forward in life, and let's not live in the past. And you don't need to go on Oprah and say, I'm all screwed up because my dad, right? And Dr. Phil's going to come out and go, oh, your life was in a rut. Now what are we going to do, right? So that's how we would do it. Now let's be honest, right? How many of you are like SWAT team leaders on vacation like me? All right, I got a few people. All right. So my wife's like, you can never rest. I'm like, I'm resting right now. Let's go. You think I'm kidding too. I'm not. I once went on a vacation. This is the God honest truth. I once went on, because I make decisions all the time in work, and it's like, I don't want to make a decision. You plan the vacation. And then when we go on vacation, then I would gripe about where we were going. So she said one time, honey, you're doing it, right? I'm like, all right, I'll do it. So this is honest. We used to leave Sunday right after church. We had our trailer hooked up to our Suburban. We head out. My wife goes, where are we going? I said, I have no idea. I literally had no idea where we were going on vacation, right? So that's the leader. You guys are following me. Not my fault. So here, back to this moral of the story. When it comes to the Lord's Day, do you look forward like a trip to Disneyland? Do you look back on what God's doing in your life and what He's done? See, what's interesting to me is, it's great to go to Disneyland. It's fun. I love it, right? But listen, you have the opportunity to meet the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. You have an opportunity for your life and your kids' life and your grandkids' life to be completely changed. You have that. And when we take Sunday and we just make it an extra day, and not a special day. And then we leave on work on Monday and we wonder why the week isn't going so well. Because your perspective is wrong. Because Sunday is meant to be a mind on Christ. And then as you work through the week, you're thinking about what God has done in the past. And as you get closer into the next Lord's Day, you're anticipating, what is God going to do in my life? What is He going to do in my life to change different areas of my life? 6, the key truth. Do I have my mind on Him, and do I trust Him as my provider? That is the point of the Sabbath. If you wonder, what is worship about? What is corporate worship about? Here it is. Do you have your mind on Christ, and are you trusting Him? Do you believe that He can provide 7 days of provisions in 6? Do you believe that? Do you have your mind where you're looking back in what He's done and looking forward into what He can do in and through your life? Number 7. What do you think God will do on your behalf if you have your mind on Him and you'll trust Him? What do you think He'll do? You know what? He'll be the God who's the provider of your life. But see, here's the temptation. The temptation is, and I know there's a big push, you want to put me through that wall and in the next wall. And that's this, well, Dan, this is a 24/7, this is a different culture. But my point is this, the temptation of the children of Israel was to go out and collect more that they need to store away for a rainy day. And the reason why you treat Sunday as an extra day, not a special day, is because you feel like you need to get one up on your competition. And you're not willing to allow the Lord to be your provider. And you don't recognize that God is the one who's giving you, even though you may not like your job from time to time in your life. So here's some next steps. You need to block out some Sundays, and you need to make it a priority in your life. Not an extra day, but a special day. And we're not going because we're under the law, right? We're going because that when we follow His plan, He blesses us and we're prosperous, and that doesn't mean necessarily financially. It's spiritual enrichment in our life. We looked at that last week. Letter B, figure out, right, your advanced plan. You know, several years ago, I made a cold call on a very prominent pastor in Northern California. And I was just a nobody and, called him up. I liked him. I thought he had some really good leadership insight. And out of the blue, I just called him and said, hey, can I go to lunch with you and just pick your brain? And he's like, sure, come on up, right? For the next week, in my mind, I was anticipating that meeting with Ray. My mind was going, and I was trying to play out, how am I going to respond? Am I going to shake his hand? Do I hug him? Do I get on my knees and say, dude, you're a rock star? I mean, what do I do, right? And I was playing through, and I had questions written down. Well, how did you do this? How did you do that? How did you do this? How did you do that, right? And I was anticipating it. When you come, and be honest with yourself, when you come to worship on Sunday, do you have that anticipation to meet the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords? Or do you just kind of roll out of bed, you look at the husband, you look at the wife and go, nothing's on, let's go to church. And then you wonder why. I'm just being honest with you. You wonder why there's no transformation in your heart. You wouldn't do that to your favorite television person, movie star, sports player, politician, whatever it is that you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't roll out of bed on a Wednesday to meet somebody on that evening that's somebody that you looked forward to meeting. You would go out and iron your clothes. Some of you'd shower. All right, there's a thought, right? You might brush your teeth. Whoa, sorry, right? I mean, you would anticipate that, right? And then letter C, practice looking back. What has God, what's he done in the past in your life? And looking forward, what is he going to do in your life on his special day? And folks, listen, if you can get this, and this is such a huge, huge principle of surviving and thriving in a broken world in which we live in, if you can get your perspective shaped by Christ, your Mondays will be better because your Sunday is not an extra day, but a special day. And it's a day where we pause, intermission, from the craziness that we live in. We pause and say, Jesus, you are Lord of our life. You are the giver of all things. You're the provider of my job. You're the provider of my family. You're the provider of everything. And for this moment, I pause and I just look up to you and say, Lord, you're awesome. You're amazing. You're incredible. And I want to leave Monday morning for work with my eyes on you. And I look back to what you've done, and I look forward into the future of what you're going to do in my life. Let's pray.